Hello everyone! My name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my October wrap up. October was a great reading month for me. I ended up reading almost the same amount of books that I read in my best reading month so far this year, which is incredible. And I read 5 of those books within a 24-hour period. Let's just dive into this, shall we? Let's start with some statistics. I got my trusty bullet journal here. In the month of October, I ended up reading 14 books, which is very good, very cool. My best month was August, where I read 15 books, so very close to my best reading month, and October is in my top 3 best reading months of this year so far. In October, I ended up reading, let me look at my genres here. I ended up reading 3 YA fantasies, 1 YA sci-fi, 2 adult fantasies, 1 adult sci-fi, 2 middle grades, 1 mystery, and 4 classics. Wow. For ratings wise, I had 1 2.5 star, and that was my lowest rating. I had 2 3 stars, I had 4 3.5 stars, 4 4 stars, and 3 5 stars. Let us go into the actual books. As I always do in my wrap-ups, I go in the order that I read them. So the very first book I ended up reading this month was for my personal book club with my friends. We ended up reading Chalky by John Wyndham, and I surprisingly really liked this one. It was the very first book I read. I think I read it like the 1st of October. I listened to it on audiobook. It's a very short book, so it didn't take me very long. It took me maybe 4 hours to get through it. I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving that one 4 stars. Honestly, when I first picked up Chalky, when I first heard of it from my friend, just the description of it sounded a little bit like a We Need to Talk About Kevin book, where you have this kid who's haunted by something, or a psychopathic child, because that was kind of what I got from reading the description once, which is basically just, it's a story from the dad's point of view about his son who has this being or an imaginary friend that he talks to that's really bothering him. And it's just a story on that. And it goes from like a normal suburban in the 70s type of style that you kind of think, could this be horror? And it could very easily be horror, but it's not. It is very gentle, and it just kind of weaves in the sci-fi a little bit, and it's very evident by the end. But I really enjoyed it, and I'm not going to say anything else about it, because if you guys are interested in it, definitely go have a listen or a read. It's very good. The next book I read in the month of October was actually a buddy read. Myself and Charles from Books on Stereo on here on YouTube did a buddy read for Paula Santiago and the River of Tears by Taylor K. Mejia. Honestly, thinking about when I read this feels like a year ago. I don't know how this was this month, but it was. And this is a middle grade story, part of the Rick Riordan Presents imprint that follows Paula Santiago and her friend Dante as they go searching for their friend Emma, who just went missing. It deals with the myth of La Llorona, the wailing ghost woman who steals children. It was good, and I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. Myself and Charles agreed that it didn't really have the humor we were wanting, and it was not nearly as creepy as I thought it was going to be. It didn't really have much creepy factor at all. It could have been so much creepier, because La Llorona is terrifying. The myth is terrifying. It could have really leaned into it more, I think. But other than that, it was quite enjoyable and really well written. Continuing with buddy reads, Charles and I went into The Diviners as well by Libba Bray. I absolutely loved this book. It was a easy 5 star. I enjoyed it from beginning to end. It had the creepy factor that I was wanting, because as a person who doesn't really love horror, doesn't really like to read thrillers, I get scared very easy. This was the perfect amount of spookiness that I want in a book. It kept me on the edge of my seat, and by the end of it, I was in like a full body sweat, not knowing what was going to happen, and it was so good. So it follows a really wide cast of characters. It is set in 1920s New York City when a demon has been brought back and is committing all these ritualistic murders to try and fully manifest in this realm as the beast. It also follows Evie, who is technically our main character in this, who goes to New York to stay with her uncle, Will, who runs a, like, creepy crawlies and... not a creepy crawlies, it's not bugs, it's like oddities and occult nature type stuff museum. And with Will and his two hired help, Sam and Jericho, they start unraveling this murder mystery that's happening, this serial killer mystery. Alongside of all this murder mystery stuff, there are kids in this book, all like sorts of like young adults and like 20-year-olds and all that kind of stuff, who are developing these powers. They are diviners. They don't quite know that all the other people in this book are diviners as well. They don't know really what it means. I don't know what it means because I haven't read the rest of this series, but it was so good and I'm so excited to get to the next ones. Then I read Warcross by Marie Lu. This is for an upcoming video. Just so you know, it's for an upcoming video, so I won't talk about it a whole lot here, but it is basically a YA sci-fi. This was the YA sci-fi that I read. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it. It was quite entertaining. It had a cool storyline. It was the first time that I've read a book that centers around a game, like a video game, and like virtual reality and how it can like take over the whole world. So it follows a girl named Amika Chen, who is a hacker, and she basically hacks into this game called Warcross to make money, do transactions. She's very good at it. At the beginning of the story, she accidentally hacks into the main games that are being hosted, which are kind of like the video game level of Olympic Games that happens all over the world, which is happening in Tokyo with the guy who made this entire game, Warcross, and the virtual reality lenses and glasses that he has created at a very, very young age. The main guy, Hideo Tanaka, invites her to Tokyo to basically find out who this other person is. Basically, this other hacker, she's hired on to try and find that person out. It's entertaining and a quick read. I listened to the audiobook, which was pretty good, and yeah, you'll hear about it more in another video soon. Then I finally finished Nearwitch by V.E. Schwab. I have been reading this book all year. I started it earlier this year and I put it down and I never picked it back up. It's just been sitting on my TBR shelf forever. So I finally picked it up. I got the audiobook through my library on Libby and I listened to it, just powered through it because I was tired of it being on my TBR. And it was really good for this time of year because it has like a little bit of a spooky vibe to it. It was okay. I ended up giving it 3 stars. Honestly, on like retrospect, it's like 2.5, but we're gonna stick with the 3 star. It was pretty okay, dark and witchy. It had like magic and shadowy vibes to it, but it definitely felt like a first novel. It has the flavor of a V.E. Schwab novel for sure, but not the mastery that she has now since she's been writing for so long. It was okay. There was a little bit of insta love in here, which I didn't really love. I don't know. And I felt like the plot was a little bit rushed and dragged in parts. But yeah, I finally finished it. Thank God. I then finished my reread of An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir in preparation for the 4th book being released this December, and I'm so excited about that book. Rereading this was a beautiful, wonderful time. I adored it. I adored every second of it. I'm excited to reread the 2nd and the 3rd book, but also worried because I remember what the 2nd and the 3rd book did to me emotionally. This is one of the only YA series, or only series in general, that I have read that has a negative arc that goes through it. So like, not everything doesn't keep getting better and better with every resolution. Doesn't really resolve well. Everything keeps going more downhill and it gets getting more dire. So this last book is either going to break me, it's most definitely going to break me, or it's going to be the most satisfying resolution ever to a series. And I'm so ready for it. But yeah, I am so glad I got to reread this. The next book I read was also one that has been sitting on my TBR shelf for a long time that I've been reading for basically this entire year so far, and that is The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. This is my classic that I wanted to read back in like April, and I only got halfway through and I never finished it. I managed to finish it and I enjoyed it. It was beautifully written. The prose is so compulsively readable and just gorgeous. But I will say that I didn't really love the characters. I didn't connect to any of them, and the plot was kind of and it again just kind of but it was the writing that definitely saved it. I gave it the 3.5 star that I gave it. Without the beautiful writing, it would have probably been a 2 star for me. It was still enjoyable, and the audiobook that I had was incredible. The lady sounded like a American Julie Andrews, which was so fun to listen to. Glad I finally got this one off my currently reading list. And then we're just gonna keep on with this 3.5 star train, aren't we? Because the next book I read was Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and I read this in anticipation of watching the movie, which I still haven't yet done, that was just released on Netflix. I ended up giving this 3.5 star. I was honestly quite disappointed with it, and that makes me so sad because this is a retelling of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and that is my favorite classic. Because of all the gothic vibes, because of the way it's written, the beautiful, just introspective prose of Charlotte Bronte, I loved that one. But this one, I went in expecting gothic vibes, expecting it to be mysterious and kind of creepy, and I got none of that. I didn't get any gothic vibes. It felt like I was reading a typical just literary novel about a housewife with like a gentle murder mystery at the end that was kind of predictable, which I know all of you who love Rebecca are screaming at me right now. It was again just not my favorite, and I'm so sad about that. But yeah, I was lacking all the gothic vibes. There were no gothic vibes in this for me. Yes, we had like one creepy character, but like it didn't build in the way that a gothic is supposed to. It didn't make the house creepy. Just wasn't there. For what it was, I recognize it's a beautifully written book. I recognize why people really like it. It was okay for me, which is why I gave it 3.5 stars. The next book I read, finally, all of you had who follow my reading vlogs were probably screaming with joy at the fact that I finally finished this e-arc that I got from NetGalley. It was Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. This was really good. It is a witchy, dark, mysterious demon set in Italy with lots of delicious food YA novel. I did a terrible job of describing that, but it was great. I had a fantastic time reading it. It just took me a long time to read it, which sucks. It follows Amelia after the brutal murder of her twin sister. Now, her and her twin sister and her grandma are witches. They also run a restaurant in Italy, so every page almost has delicious food on it, and it just made me so hungry as I was reading the descriptions of the food. It was so good. After the brutal murder of Vittoria, the twin sister of Amelia, Amelia goes on a revenge path to try and figure out who killed her sister. She found her sister's body in the basement of a monastery. When she found her body, her heart was ripped out and there was a man, a demon, standing above her body. Amelia assumes that this man killed her sister. She summons him back from hell. Turns out the demon that she summons is one of the princes of hell, one of the 7 princes of hell, and the way she summons him gets them tied up in this bargain that they have to do. They basically band together to solve this murder. It is dark, and the events of this world are opening up to the world of hell. It's a lot, but it's a lot of fun. I cannot wait to see where this series goes. Very dark, very witchy, and at times kind of sexy, which is great. I gave that one 4 stars. And then we get into the 5 books that I read for my Halloween readathon. If you missed that vlog, I will tag it down below for you to go see. I read 5 books in the span of 24 hours, and I'm very happy with the way it went. It gave me all the Halloween vibes, which is amazing, and I ended up having another 5-star read, but I won't spend too long talking about them now because I did talk about them a lot in that vlog. But I started off with a kind of a low, with a 2.5-star book, and that was Halloween Party by Agatha Christie. This was intriguing. The mystery was cool when I first read the description and went into this book. It is about a 13-year-old girl who gets murdered at a Halloween party when all the other partygoers are in the next room. Hercule Poirot, the main detective guy that Agatha Christie writes, this is part of his series, figures out who the killer was. With that, I was expecting Halloween vibes, I was expecting Halloween party, I was expecting some detective work, and just to have a good time. And I honestly didn't have a great time. There was a lot of misogyny, sexism, and victim blaming at the beginning of this book because everyone that Hercule went to go talk to, and even Hercule himself, kind of blamed girls for getting themselves in these situations. Wow, I just realized that the light is like this. We're gonna close that. It just isn't a great time. And then the mystery itself got so convoluted and mixed up with these 4 other murders, and it was so complex and confusing that for such a tiny book, it was just too much. It was way too much. So 2.5 stars. Then I ended up reading a really cute, really fun graphic novel called Beetle and the Hollow Bones by Eliza Lane. I ended up reading this, giving it 4 stars. It was super cute. It's on the same level as Mooncakes for me. It deals with like really magical creatures. Our main character, Beetle, is a goblin and she's desperate to become a sorcerer, but goblin magic is different and her grandma is teaching her how to use this magic and she just wants to not be a goblin and do the better things. She thinks they're better. And she's made friends with this ghost who lives in the mall nearby. Blob Ghost is actually tied to the mall. They can't leave the mall. So Beetle basically makes it her prerogative to figure out how to help Blob Ghost escape the mall, which is super cute. And there's a whole other family that comes in called the Hollow Bones and their interactions and stuff. It's very magical, very witchy, and really good for this time of year. Loved it. And then I listened to the very fast audiobook to The Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde. This is one of his short stories that he wrote, and I gave it 3 stars. It was very quintessential Oscar Wilde, very sassy, very funny, and dealt with a ghost that haunts the Canterville house and has been haunting it for centuries. When an American family moves in, he is no longer the one terrorizing. He becomes the one who is terrorized by this family. And it's a good time. And it's very weird, but also not my favorite thing. It wasn't like super amazing or anything, but yeah. Then I finished reading a book that I'd been reading for about a week, and I originally picked it up on a complete whim from my bookshelves because I was looking for something witchy and scary. The only witchy book I had on my shelves was this one, but I was so pleasantly surprised. It wasn't scary at all, but it had all the witch vibes, all the fall vibes. It's set in 1880s New York when Cleopatra's Needle was being moved into New York, and I just loved it. And that is The Witches of New York by Amy McKay. Every single page of this book was incredible. I was listening to the audiobook as well as this, and I'm still very confused because the audiobook had extra chapters that this did not have. I actually have the arc of this book from 2016 because I found it at a thrift store and decided to like give it a home because you're not supposed to resell arcs. And so I had that and I was reading it along with the audiobook thinking, wow, this arc is very wrong. I have to go get a final copy because it doesn't follow the story at all. And I got the final copy, which is this one, final. It still doesn't have those chapters in it. So I'm thinking that it might be like a Canadian versus a US kind of deal. It's not only that some of the paragraphs and the word choices have been changed, it's that there's full-on chapters missing from this edition, which is so bizarre to me. Either way, really loved this. 5 stars. So good. It follows 3 witches, Beatrice, Adelaide, and Eleanor. Adelaide and Eleanor run this like tea shop that also helps women in situations that are very personal. If they were ever found out, they would be thrown in jail, that kind of thing. One day, Beatrice comes to the city of New York to apply for a job posting that was posted at this tea shop, and she gets a job because of what she is, because of a premonition that Eleanor had in the night before in a dream. It's basically their witchy escapades along with a reverend who's being convinced and coerced by demons to rid the world of witches. Not only do we have witches, we have Beatrice who can see ghosts. and she can talk to ghosts and spirits, and she gets into that, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I'm doing a terrible job of explaining it, but it is so good. I loved it so much. And the very last book that I read in the month of October was The Halloween Tree by Ray Bradbury. I listened to this audiobook on Halloween night and I got all of the Halloween vibes. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It is a classic, very weird adventure on Halloween story about boys who learn the true meaning of like death and saving their friend. It's very interesting, but it definitely gave me those Halloween vibes that I was looking for, which is great. But yes, my friends, that is my absolutely massive list of books that I read in the month of October. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below what your favorite was. I think my 2 favorites were definitely The Diviners and The Witches of New York. I didn't say this before, but The Witches of New York felt like The Diviners meets Practical Magic to me. It was so good. Oh, so good. Anyways, friends, I will catch you in another video soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.